I'm recording. So, knock it off. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
This is the INKPULP Podcast.
I like that opening bumper, Shawn.
It's good, right?
It's not too flamboyant. It's not too arrogant. It kind of matches your personality. It's a little on the humble side. It's 16 seconds and it's done. Actually, 12 seconds and it's done. Yeah. I dig it a lot.
Listen to anymore.
All right, let's do this one more time. This annoying thing that I invite into my home on a weekly
basis.
All
right. Matteo, we have to talk about this.
Let me do my thing. What episode is this already?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, like nobody's here, right?
Yeah. It's not like we don't invite somebody on. Matteo, by the way, Jim's not here. Let's talk about your thing.
But go ahead.
All right, listen. This is what is this? 128 now, right?
No.
129 episode. I'm getting closer. I'm getting better at tracking this stupid show. Episode 129. We have our typical people on this podcast who I referred to with Jim as like the annoying things that I invite into my house that I typically can't stand at shows, but somehow I love them enough to do it on a weekly basis. Speaking of,
you call us the Guido and the Jew, right?
Guido and the Jew. That is your early 1980s sitcom.
The DJs.
It's like Jake and the Fat Man.
Listen, guys, audience. Mr. JIM MAHFOOD, thank you for joining us, buddy. Thank you for making time during your morning.
Hey.
This feels like we are at a show. No, it's amazing. It's amazing. As a matter of fact, I was just telling them in Seattle, where I went up there just for a day and a half. It was like eating. It's like being, when I'm hanging out with these guys, it's like being compelled to eat a shit sandwich. And between you, Ramon, Tommy, it was like, oh, take a break from eating a shit sandwich and hang out with these gourmet people. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being the gourmet attitude.
Otherwise known as the Fratelli Panini.
It's awful.
Yes.
It's awful. Jim, thank you for being here. Let's not lose track of it. All right, Shawn, let's divert away from our guest and talk about Matteo.
All right. So Matteo, this fucking, you came to this country for Emerald City Comic-Con and you dropped a nuclear warhead upon our population that your son has spread. So it hit me. All right. It hit Steph. She was down with pneumonia from it. She was fucked up. Now Zoe and my son are home with this shit. Jason has it.
Yeah.
Mo has it. Mo's daughter has it. I don't know how Jim doesn't have it. Eric, nothing for you?
No.
And I'm wondering, I haven't heard from Tommy. I don't even know if Tommy's alive anymore. I think you killed Tommy.
Oh,
I
shit.
think you killed Tommy.
Wait, but Shawn, that must have mutated into its own thing at this point, right?
No, because Matteo said last week that in Italy, it's taking people like 3 weeks to get over it.
Yeah, 3 weeks. Yeah.
I mean, I've still got it. It's barely there, but it likes to remind me it's here.
Yeah.
Can I give you guys a point of reference?
You still have it too?
Look at you two, right? Look at you for telling shit sandwiches. And then look at me and Jim. We are like the paragon of health. Look at us. Look how great, like Jim's skin. Yeah, Jim's skin is like amazing. It's pearlescent. You know what I mean? It's got like there's a sunbeam.
Beautiful olive Mediterranean Middle Eastern skin.
No, you guys are one foot in the grave right now. It's awful how like close you guys are to the grave. Like I saw the garbage that you guys were eating at the show, and I was like, "Yep, those guys. I better start." I hope that you have your last will and testament lined up already. I hope you're a bit because you guys are pretty much gone. Seriously, what did you do to these people, Matteo? What did you do?
Nothing.
It was that innocent little fratellino, Aaliyah, who spread this shit.
Yeah.
Oh. I just remember. I remember the day of, Matteo just started coughing, like out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Completely good throughout the airport, completely good throughout the drive. And right around the evening, he just started coughing. And
no. I was already coughing like 2 days prior.
But it's at night, it gets worse.
Yeah.
That's when the cough
it gets around evening starts, you start to feel it again.
Did you warn any of the guys? Did you tell them, hey, I'm a walking, petri dish right now that could potentially kill you with this Italian?
I mean, I went with you to the CVS.
No, but I would have loved it if you had just told us, like ahead of time, hey, I'm gonna infect the hell out of you guys when we.
Oh no, I didn't know about infecting someone. I wasn't making out with people.
Yeah.
It's weird because like on the second or third night, I was out, at dinner with you guys and like sampling your drink, Shawn, like whatever you had at like the steakhouse. So I mean, I was like literally drinking from the same goblet that you were, and I guess I just got lucky.
Or the alcohol killed it.
Oh, good point.
Just robust health, Jim. Don't let them take anything away.
I was just trying to close the door. Just trying to close the door on Eric saying that.
You're doing great, Jim. Keep living the life that you're living, because again, look at the upper right hand, look up at the lower left hand. That's not the direction you want to go. Turn the bus as quickly as possible. All right, we brought Jim on, because I think we wanted to kind of pick his brain in regards to the level. Well, first of all, I don't know if you've ever been to JIM MAHFOOD's table anytime that he's at a show, but this brother doesn't sit down. I have rarely ever seen Jim like, I'm gonna take, I'm just gonna sit down for a minute and kind of like ease off on the gas pedal when he's in his salesman pitch mode, right? I've never seen that. So that's one thing I admire in a big way. But not only that, you've been doing that consistently. This isn't like a short sprint for you hustling, right? This is a long-term marathon for you hustling. And now I'm starting to have a point, me personally, and I think we had talked about this the past couple of times that we've done the show, like the level of dedication that you need to have once you start promoting your own work. And so we want to pick your brain about like things that you've been doing this how long, Jim? The self-publishing.
26 years as my career.
Oh my goodness, man.
Yeah. And then I started, I grew up in St. Louis, and I started working as a kid when I was in high school for a local publisher in St. Louis. These guys called Artline Studios that were publishing their own black and white comics.
Yeah.
And in like 91, 92, I was like 15, 16. They kind of hired me as like their office assistant. So I was like erasing pencils from inked pages.
Sure.
I was learning the tools of the trade because there was no internet, and there was no, like, I didn't know the secrets of how to make comics. So they're the ones that literally introduced me to, you work on 11x17 Bristol board, the inking tools you use. Right. This is a T-square. Like, I didn't know any of this shit. So I saw those guys setting up at conventions around the Midwest and just hustling their own comics. And it was like wannabe black and white, like superhero self-published kind of comics. Sure. But one of the dudes, this guy Lorenzo, was a smooth talking brother from Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
He was 10 years older than me. And I just saw him at conventions, like hustling his ass off and doing commissions for people and sweet talking people and promoting his work. And it was just this lesson in how to hustle, but also just how to like talk to people and be a charming human being, like just be smooth as hell. And that was kind of his
smooth like butter.
Yeah. And it was a really cool thing to witness. And, you know, at that time too, everyone was publishing their own like little ash can, little mini comics, like Inkos or whatever. And that was like the thing you did, like you made a new ash can for each big convention of the year, and you go and sell it for $10 or whatever. And that mentality stuck with me when I left and went to college, and then was hanging out with like Huddleston and all those guys. And we were still contributing to local Kansas City underground zines, magazines. Mike and his crew were self-publishing a comic book called Wireless that he was drawing. And I eventually became his inker. We did 2 full issues together, and neither one of them got published because we just ran out of money. You know, we had a friend who was funding all this. And the friend his mom or dad, they cut him off. They cut the credit card off.
Sure.
So there was like
Turn
one
off the
issue of
faucet.
Wireless produced that Mike penciled in himself. But my point is, like, I was always just around from 15 years old up to, I was always around.
Yeah.
Everyone was just like, no, you don't wait for Marvel or DC to hire. You don't wait for anybody. You just do your own shit.
That's
Sure,
amazing.
sure.
That's
Hey,
amazing.
can we talk about that really quick? This is for everybody, right? Like people use the term hustle sort of just like broadly, right?
Mhm.
In your guys' experience, right? Just to everybody, what does that mean? Jim clearly has experience with it, but when I hear people say it's so general that I think there's a learning opportunity here for people to be like, oh, what does that mean when you're hustling at a table, when you're hustling getting your word out? It seems intuitive, but I don't think it's as intuitive as people think. Right?
You're talking about hustling as applied to being at your table in Artist Alley specifically.
Sure, or wherever the conversation takes us. Ultimately, what do you think?
Well, hustling for me, I use the term a lot. I used to think it meant just be a hard worker.
Sure,
but it wasn't until recently that I think I got a better understanding of what it meant to hustle, and that I learned it from Jim, not the word, but the hustle. Like it's being entrepreneurial. It's making your money, not working for someone to make your money.
sure.
So it's changed for me in that way. Learning to build a business, like I see that as hustling, and also it's having the mentality to push through the difficult times, having the stamina to keep going. It's no joke. But yeah, that's something that once Jim and I started hanging out, it really kind of blew my mind and opened my world to, oh shit, I have been asleep at the wheel for far too long.
Right.
I think so.
Well,
like,
speaking of
even doing
because I was
podcast and everything.
Well, okay, that's fair. I think that was my first attempt into the world of building something for myself.
Yeah.
Because at the time, like I was like what you would refer to as a jobber. Like I was just working, like waiting for a publisher or going after the jobs. Like I could hustle that like hard back then, but that was networking. So maybe that's one aspect of hustling. But I just relied on other people to give me work so I could get money coming in.
Yeah. Speaking of relying on other people getting in work, Matteo, it seems like
I was waiting for
you just landed.
I saw your face, man. I was waiting for Shawn to be done.
Is it obvious by now? No, I've seen, Matteo is to me, everybody here is a kid, but Matteo in specific, Matteo is like all of 27 years old. He'll always be, by the way, everybody on this panel, you'll always be the age that I remember meeting you, right? You will never get any older than that. And when I met Matteo, he was like a zygote. You know what I mean? He was like a small embryo of a kid, still smiling, still in love with the world. Nothing can harm him. He's still doing that right now. He's still clueless as far as like everything that could potentially harm him. But things have changed for you significantly. Like, right, Matt? You were, at that point, just trying to break the barrier of getting into an industry and making a name.
Yep.
And, how is like we've done, I can't even remember, countless conventions at this point, right? To the point where you're like minimizing convention appearances at this point. And that's obviously due to the fact that you busted your ass to get this far where you can make those choices. But from the beginning to like now, where has that quote unquote hustle changed for you? What's the differences there?
Oh yeah, no, to me, it was the first time that I came to the States for my first show. Because of course I was totally clueless about what I was doing. I just had my first book published for Image. So I decided, might as well, go to San Diego and see what's going on over there, and trying to promote this book that just came out. It was my first publication ever.
Was that Hyperkinetic?
Yeah. So, and the show itself was a kind of a disaster because the book didn't do well, and but like I took that as an excuse to learn and to observe the other professionals around me and see what they were doing at their table. Like I saw people around me super busy, and I started observing them. And as soon as I got back home, despite the fact that again it didn't go well technically, but I came back home with a lot of data. And from then on, I started, I saw that everybody had a sketchbook. So I was like, okay, first thing I'm going to do my own sketchbook.
Yeah.
And then, so I started, literally going around my town and finding printers and ask them, the prices and everything, just to have an idea.
That's a hustler.
Yeah. So
can I ask you a quick question in regards to what you said? So when you went to San Diego and the book didn't do well, and that was the reason you were really going there, did it upset you? Did you get upset? Did it beat you down?
Well,
or did you quickly adjust and be like, I'm going to learn?
I was upset because, my expectation were obviously higher. It's my first publication. I put a lot of energy into it. So, of course, but on the other hand, like my attitude is always to, trying to find, even from a defeat, trying to find something, good out of it in order to learn and, and do better.
Right. The reason
one really important thing to me was to observe the other professionals at shows, because, I come from a culture, which is the European comic book culture, which is basically your job is just to do the pages and deliver the pages. Then the book gets published, and your publisher invites you to shows where I think we already talked about it. So I'll try to make it as quick as possible, but you basically get invited. So you don't spend money because you're a guest. And in exchange for that, you just, agree with the publisher. You're going to be sitting at the table for, I don't know, like a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the afternoon, something like that. I'll just sign, I'll just do free sketches for everyone who purchases a copy of the book that you did. So, and that's, it's nice because you're treated like an author, and you feel important.
Celebrity.
Oh, because you're a guest, so everything's
that's how you got access to that app.
I know. Okay, listen.
Yeah. But at the same time, like there's no other aspect to the business of doing shows, which is a big thing in the States. Like there's actually people that don't really publish anything and just constantly do shows, for example, which is something that doesn't exist, or at least didn't exist in Italy.
Right.
Yeah. Let me take the opportunity to celebrate the fact that we're talking about your guys' humble beginnings, right? But just recently, and this is, by the way, this is across the board, but generally the spirit of this is true. What I remember from Jim, and it was, I can't recall how many years back it was, but it was just a guy, again, never sitting down, always engaging with people. But on recent times in his social media, by the way, if you're not following him, please go do it right now. Go to Instagram, and you're not on Twitter, are you, Jim? You're smart.
I am.
Darn it. Okay, so go to Instagram.
To my Instagram, it just posts what I post on Instagram.
Yeah, but you're doing a lot more world traveling, and I go like, there's a guy that freaking deserves every minute of that sort of like his busting his butt has gotten him across the Atlantic and going everywhere else that's not local to the shows that we used to do. Congratulations, man.
Yeah,
well deserved, well earned.
Yeah,
that's really freaking awesome.
Weird.
And that's Matteo too, right? By the way, it's when he said like going to San Diego, using professionals as a point of reference to how he conduct his career. He was talking about me. I know he was trying to not give me too much credit, but again, it was like, oh, I will break the ice for you. I shall be that icebreaker. Follow me, small ship, and then afterwards, there you are.
Right. Matteo, were you showing
Matteo too, dude? I mean,
oh, sorry.
Yeah, jokes aside, I was gonna say, jokes aside, Matteo has busted his butt. That climb to where he was unable to, I don't think he could chain 3 words in English the first time that I met him in San Diego. He smiled a lot, he smiled a lot, but then I realized, when he told me the stories later, there's a reason why he was smiling, because he was just trying to be as amicable as possible, right? And then by the time we saw each other later on, where he picked up a little bit more, I'd realized, man, this guy is nonstop doing this, right? He was at the one point he would never get up from his table. He would just take on as much work as possible. these days he's kind of fluffing off. You know what I mean? But I bet you after his most recent works where it's not landing as well, I won't say which title because we all know which one it is. But like after that, he needs to get back on that freaking grind because that faith that his audience has given him is going away. And same thing with Shawn, right? I think Shawn is always in that transformative state where he's like trying to figure out what the good fit is for him. You took a bunch of formulas back in the day, Shawn, and it didn't seem to like fit well, right? And I'd come to realize just in recent, maybe like the past 4 or 5 years, you're like, I'm not going to play with those toys anymore because it doesn't make sense for me to do it. It makes sense for other people to do it. And I think that's one of the key things. If there's a takeaway from me watching you guys and just hanging out, it's like, oh, everybody has their sort of thing that they do. But thankfully, we're getting into a place now. And Jim has like forged, you're like 10 years, 2 decades ahead of us, man.
Absolutely.
But you forged this path way sooner than we did. And I think it comes from that background that you say. You gave us a light version of it, but it comes from a place of like, oh, I didn't have to, you weren't dependent on the systems that we plugged ourselves into almost almost automatically right up the front. You were like, oh, that's another system and I can use that. But I grew up on this. And so it was that felt more comfortable and natural to you.
Yeah. Well, I realized early on, like, I'm never going to be a monthly penciler at Marvel or DC. Like, that's not my style. That's not my path, my destiny or whatever. So for me, it was like, well, how do I exist then in the space of freelance comic books, illustration? In the early 2000s, I started freelancing for animation studios in LA, doing like character design stuff and just weird things.
How old were you when you kind of had that realization that like, I'm a square peg I'm not going to try to fit into that round hole over there.
Pretty much like in like 97 when I finished the Gen X book for Marvel, like that was just a one-off one shot, but that got me the Clerks gig with Kevin Smith and Bob Schreck when they just first formed Oni. And when Oni formed, that's when I was like, okay, this is my tribe in comics. This is who I'm latching onto. This is Schreck, who's from both indie and mainstream worlds of comics. And he's got the old school guys like Matt Wagner, Frank Miller, Simon Bisley along for the ride with Oni, but he's also got the new kids like me, Scott Morse, Andy Watson, China Clugston. Paul Pope was already sort of established, but Schreck brought this incredible melting pot of people together. And he was like, I just want you to be you, kid. Like, I want you to draw how you draw, do the Clerks thing, then do your Girl Scout stuff with us, but just be you because you're on your like weird, funky path. And you shouldn't divert from that. Like you should just, so, Bob and other people were kind of instrumental in allowing me to just be me.
I think about when I was there, when I was visiting you and we went out with Schreck and then we came back to your place. I think we were recording a podcast.
Oh yeah.
I remember Schreck was at your art table looking through all your work and I just saw him. He lit up. He was just like loving seeing it all. And he muttered this and I was like, this is so awesome. He goes, and people say drugs are bad.
Like, by the way, let's take a moment, but just so people who know that it's like the Shawn and Jim are talking about Bob Schreck, who I've had an opportunity to meet in the past. Huge advocate for my work, always had a kind thing to say and a good smile to share every time that we ran into each other at a show. I hadn't seen him in what feels like decades now, right? Really, really good guy. And as a matter of fact, the spirit of what Jim is talking about, where he advocates for people just being them and letting them succeed with the kind of stuff that's really super exciting and oftentimes very different from what's been cut from and what's being established in the mainstream. That's Bob Schreck through and through. So all due respect and love to Bob. Anytime that I had a chance to talk to him, he's always asking me about what I'm doing and advocating for my work. So thank you, dude.
Yeah. I just saw him a couple of weeks ago. I took him out for dinner for his birthday and it's always
right on.
Incredible time catching up with him. And I always remind him, I'm like, hey man, you're partially responsible for this, for me. I'm like, this is partially your fault. And he'll laugh. But I'm like, no, I mean, you really took a big chance on me. And I mean, he's the one he convinced Kevin Smith to let me draw the Clerks book. Kevin wasn't necessarily on board with me drawing that book. He had a different artist in mind, and Schreck was like, no, dude, you want an indie guy. Like, you want an unknown, you want an edgy, and Kevin had to come around to it. But Schreck was like really one of my champions. And I think in comics, you kind of have to have that if you're working with other people, publishers, editors, you kind of have to have some person.
I can't imagine that book with who Schreck wanted on it, drawing it. It just wouldn't have worked at all. Kevin Smith.
You mean Smith, yeah.
Oh yeah. But it's a fanboy. I mean, I won't say the name. I'll tell you guys off camera. But it's a fanboy. What was that?
It's Matteo Scalera, dude. It's Matteo Scalera.
Matteo was only 10 years old when this was happening, you guys. This was 97. Matteo was, 4 years old.
I actually, like, my joke was it was Jim Lee.
Right, but you're not far. Is what I'm saying. Is you're not far off from who it was, and it just would have been a weird fit.
You had a question for Matteo, Jim, that I cut you off.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So Matteo, at that first San Diego you were talking about, were you actually running around with a portfolio of your work, showing samples to publishers, trying to line up other work?
I was actually more like focused on creating like a network with other artists. So I was running around with copies of my recently, published book
with Hyperkinetic.
And that's
what a fitting title for your first book, because it's such a great description of your work currently too.
Sorry? I missed that.
The title for that book, Hyperkinetic.
Oh, okay.
It's just fortuitous that was the title of your first book, because your work is extremely alive and active, and that title really fits it still to
Look
this
at
day.
Shawn being complimentary, dude. This is not like. This is them just like this is the visual personification of them. By the way, you guys don't see this because you're not hanging out in the hotel room. But first of all, we get a lot more raw than this. But second of all, there's a lot more like chest bumping between these dum-dums. Like they just run at each other, chest out, and just like, you're awesome, dude. No, you're awesome. No, it's like a lot of that. And then we miss the cab because like they're sitting there patting each other on the back,
So no, again, like my main thing was networking with other artists, because till then, like my relationships with other artists were through DeviantArt.
Oh yeah.
So that was the actual first chance that I got to actually meet the person. So I started networking like that, and that's where I met Eric. I just stopped at his table. I bought his sketchbook, but back in the day, it was the Enter the Mandarin, just the artist edition of the Iron Man book.
Yeah,
and I left a copy of my book there, and for speaking again on hustling, like from then on, that became my thing. Like I started doing a lot of shows, and like I was, not to brag about it, which what you say when you're about to brag, but
it's coming, dude.
I'm the only one. Like I'm the only Italian artist who was doing all those shows. Like because normally for Italians, they were just doing San Diego and New York, and that's it. And nowadays there's a couple of artists that I've started doing that. Like Mirka.
I was gonna say Mirka's at every show.
Mirka's amazing.
She's doing a bunch of shows, but yeah. So that was my way to hustle. So
well, let me follow up on that real quick, Matteo. You cleared something, cued you in. Maybe it was just like, hey, I like doing these shows or whatever. But what made you sort of say, I need to do more of these shows on this side of the world? You're coming from Italy, right? That's a commitment for you to continuously do these shows. Like, what was there something that made you go like, yeah, I think this is important for me to continue to do these shows, as opposed to what you say, which is like, typically people are just like doing the big ones, but you're like, I'm going to do as many of these smaller ones. That's not San Diego. That's not.
Because since I got my that first gig, like Hyperkinetic, I was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do U.S. comic books. So
yeah.
Like I went to a show, and that's my new environment. That's from now on. This becomes my new environment. So I'm gonna do everything I can to just be here every time.
Why did you want to do American comics versus European comics? Was it because they were more action superhero style stories?
Yeah, in general, the storytelling and everything was my thing. Because in Italy, like if you wanna, make a living out of, being a comic book artist, you generally work for Bonelli, which is the publisher that publishes, Dylan Dog, Tex, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they have a very specific set of rules, so you can't just, go crazy. They have really, really strict rules in regards to how to do comic books. And the French comic books, they've never been my thing, because there's, it's the storytelling. It's not my ideal thing.
Right.
And so, I mean, the other option was manga, but we all know how, hard it is to make a career there.
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
So American comic books were, the only thing that really fit what I was doing.
Makes a lot of sense.
Excellent.
I was going to follow up with something with Jim. Oh yeah, we talked about this, and you said you listened to a couple of podcasts before, right? Or a couple of these episodes before. By the way, thank you so much. Not just to Jim, but to everybody who listens to this freaking ongoing weekly, monthly train wreck of just
we can even name
Eric,
Frank. Zach,
the 5 people. By the way, these are all fictional people that Matteo said. Like, these are all not real people. Matteo just came up with them, so we feel good about ourselves.
On a serious note, though, I'm getting lots of comments and DMs on Instagram about people loving it. In fact, Eric, I sent you a picture to pull up on screen to illustrate this very point. I was advertising an episode of the podcast on my Instagram, and this is what I got in my DMs. If Eric can
show it, and it pisses me off that it's true, but here we go. See that?
All right, so I posted this picture. It was about us going to Como. That's what it was. And I put Eric's name right above Mr. Freeze. And this is the message I get. So people are catching on.
I'm going to stop presenting this now because it really makes me mad. And I knew it was by design that Matteo did it. All right, we were talking about...
by the way, sorry to interrupt. And,
go.
This is the last time I interrupt you. Lorenzo De Felici, the guy that we talked about a couple of episodes ago, the artist from Chroma.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with it, Jim.
Did you show his work? Did you show his work?
Yeah.
Incredible stuff, man. Incredible. Yeah, I just watched that actually a couple days ago.
Awesome. So he contacted me yesterday and thanked me.
Nice.
Yeah.
He heard the podcast?
Yeah. He heard the podcast, and I was really happy and
awesome.
Honored.
So. Did you thank him for giving us because that podcast was basically dead. There was nothing in that episode until we started talking about that kid's work. I swear to God, it was like grinding to a halt. You know what I mean? It was a train that was messed up, and it was coming into the station. It was on fire. Thank you to him, dude. He's an awesome work. I don't know him as a guy, but thank you for sharing his work. What was I going to ask?
Amazing work. Before? Was unfamiliar with his stuff, and now he's on my radar for sure.
Oh man, he's amazing.
Jim, we were talking about how you'd been kind of doing this for a while, right? And there was a couple episodes previous that we were talking about things have changed significantly. But it seems like there's a level of constant to when you're attending shows. I don't know, has your sort of like game plan changed at the different shows that you've been in? Or things like, have you noticed where you're like, oh, we're talking about hustle, right? So everything is always about like, how do I change with the times that's in front of me? Has anything changed significantly from you from the time where you're like, okay, there's a full-time gig for me to do this show to the way that it is now?
Yeah, I mean, I was always doing as many shows as I could, and then obviously that grinded to a halt with, the 2020 situation. And then in 2021, I started getting out. What's that?
What happened?
global pandemic.
There was a pandemic, Matteo.
Oh,
I don't know if you heard about it. Matteo didn't know. Matteo was just going to conventions by himself, setting up in front of the convention centers.
Where did everyone go? I actually went to the airport in March 2020 to go to Washington. Like, no, we can't let you go. Why? Why?
Oh, yeah. No, I remember in 2020, Shawn and I were like calling each other a couple days before Emerald City. Like, Shawn was like,
yeah, I remember.
I'm still flying out there, I think. And then days before the convention started, they were like, okay, this is off, this is canceled. And then we knew like shit was changing. But I was going to say, as soon as things kind of started to open up, I got back out there in 2021. And that's also when I sort of quit doing commissions at conventions around that time, and kind of changed my game plan and presentation of, instead of being rushed and running my own table and drawing and sitting and having my head down and getting distracted, I was like, why don't I just focus on standing and looking people eye to eye and just having conversations. And I actually move more product and more original art that way. And I find it to be like way more engaging. It's also like a weird psychological experiment, because when you stand and you're at eye level with people could just be walking by your booth and kind of glance over at what you're doing. And if I make eye contact with them or whatever, kind of give them the nod, like, hey, what's up? Most of the time they come over and they'll be like, awesome. What's going on over here? What do you got going on? And I explain my work to them. That's the other thing, is you have to have patience and put your ego aside, because even though I've been in this for a couple decades, most young people do not know who we are. Sure. So I have to explain to them, this is my thing. I worked on Tank Girl. I have this creator-owned book at Image. I do this. And you have to kind of be patient and tell the same story like 50 times a day.
Sure.
But that's part of the hustle. That's part of the presentation. And I've kind of adopted that as my model, and it seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah. I think there's a part of it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then I was going to say, and then I do commissions now basically through my art dealer, inkyknuckles.com. And I do more finished, polished pieces at home that I can spend time on, that I'm proud to display on social media, because some of my commissions were getting to the point where I'd look at them days after the con and just be like, this is not up to par. This is not. Because I mean, Matteo and like Tommy Lee, Shawn, I mean, all you guys, you have the ability to sit and do these commissions at shows that are full blown illustrations. Sure. I mean, they're not sketches. They're not half-assed pieces. I mean, it's like, Shawn, you're Rocketeer at Emerald City. Matteo, like, you're Batman. You're the panda from Body Bags. I look at these images and I see them unfolding in real time at the show. And I'm just like, okay, this is a specific skill. Most people are not going to have this skill. I don't really have this skill to sit, think, pencil it out, compose this shot with depth, background, dynamics. You're looking up the photo reference of the character's costume. That's just not in my wheelhouse to really sit, do that, and run my own table. So
well, I mean,
we're all different, you know.
Also we have help. I mean, like, we don't have to sell shit. We have people taking care of that, so we can draw.
Right. So I either would need to get an assistant in the future that runs my table, or I kind of like this new model though of what I'm doing. Like,
I like the model.
Standing and being
absolutely, dude. Don't get away from that, Jim. Don't get away from that.
And I've been noticing, Jim, in this last few shows that we did together. Like, I remembered you doing commissions, like, you know, like us. So I remember me, you know, browsing through your commissions, and then you would come over and browse mine. And lately I was like, so is Jim not doing commissions anymore? And then, you know, you just confirmed that. But if I may ask, like, of course, we're not going to talk about actual numbers, but in terms of earnings at the end of the show, in terms of profits, is it more or less the same? You're doing less, but you're working less. What's your, you know?
It's sort of the same.
Wow.
which that was kind of the thing that confirmed it to me.
Awesome.
Was
that's awesome.
Okay, I can still go to New York Comic Con and basically make the same amount of money and not do commissions, because by default people just start buying my original art.
Yeah.
You know, and I've got stuff in my binders that range from super small pieces that are 200 to published covers that are like maybe 2,200 or 2,500 or whatever.
Sure.
So I have high-end collectors coming in on Thursday buying bigger original pieces, and then throughout the 4 days I've got people that are like, oh, I'll take that $200 little drawing. You know,
and it adds up.
So it adds up, and I'm still doing the thing where I will ship product in advance to the hotel I'm staying at. So I'll ship 4 or 5 boxes of books, all my trades, my pop-up book, my little mini comic sketchbooks that I have. Prints sell really well. So, but you know, again, that's something that like you have to handle all this. You have to go to FedEx. You have to, you know, get to the hotel the day before the con. Shawn has helped me with this, where the day before the convention, we're just making runs to my hotel with empty luggage, filling the luggage with books, rolling it down the street to the Javits Center, unloading, going back to the hotel, you know, and luckily Shawn's extremely high while this is all happening. So it makes it way easier, and it makes it easier for me.
Shawn doesn't even remember it, you know. Shawn.
Wait, when did I do this?
Right. Thank God. And afterwards, I'm like, Shawn, we're gonna get an incredible lunch after this on my treat, you know.
And we do.
Now the thing is, Jim is the guy that gets Shawn high, right? Like, I need help. I gotta go get Shawn high really quick, and then I'm gonna drag it. Can I mention to you? I think it's in the spirit of what you just said, Jim, which is, I remember sitting at a Heroes convention in North Carolina with Becky Cloonan the first time that she came and sat with us. And for whatever, like, Becky rarely takes commissions, right? And so when she was at that show and she was struggling with it, just half jokingly, I said, and I was joking about the entire, like, oh, dude, you can't possibly, like, because I always consider being at a convention as like, hey, I have a job while I'm here, right? Which is like, I've got to treat this in as much as I'm treating similarly to when I'm treating, you know, how I'm handling myself when I'm sitting behind a desk, right, at home. And I said something just half jokingly. Becky was like, well, you know, hey, doing these commissions, this isn't it, but like doing these commissions is your job. And Becky, went into like, we were cracking jokes for like 15 minutes beforehand, right? And as soon as I said that, Becky came down from like the joke cloud and was just like, this isn't my job. My job is drawing comics. Like that, you know what I mean? She went into that serious mode, and that's always stuck with me, right? Because in my head, I'm all like, she's right. Now, I didn't do anything about it because I'm a fuck off, right? But like in my head, it always stuck to be like, right, Becky is that in the similar sort of vein as Jim is. Like the job is making the comics. The nice thing to do on top of the job is coming to a convention and interacting with people and engaging and selling the book, which she was the entire weekend, right? She didn't take it for granted that she's, you know, Becky Cloonan and she's done all of these things. She's got a huge fan base. It was still in the front of her mind, I need to book, and I need to move. And we say this all the time, and it seems kind of like heartless, but I need to move product, right? I need to move these units because I brought them with me. There's always that in the back of your mind of like, I need to make X amount in order to facilitate me being here, you know, for me to consider this thing like a good investment in my career. So that to me has always struck me as like, that's also part of the whole sort of like quote unquote hustle, right? Where you need to pay attention to what are you prioritizing? Because to Matteo's point, there's people who go to conventions and that's all they do, right? And I'm not taking anything away from that. I think that's, if you can make that into a living, hell yeah, go and do that. But I think for everybody, if I'm speaking accurately, everybody on this panel is like in the business of making comic books. How do we do that so that we can continue to make comic books under our own steam, right? And conventions obviously is one component of that, but it's not exclusively that. The convention is just like, this is how you get people to be exposed to your work. So when you were talking about like, you know, getting rid of, you know, being humble, getting rid of ego, and just explaining to people almost on a remedial level, like, I'm so-and-so, and this is the work that I've done, and blah, blah, blah. It's almost like reading out your resume as you go. but you've kind of got, like you say, you've gotten used to it, but it's almost, from a hustle perspective, you almost have to incorporate that. You almost have to have an understanding of this boilerplate thing that you say to people so that they can get ramped up to where you are right now in the product that you're selling, right?
It's a sales pitch.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And, my dad was a marketing and sales guy, my whole life. And he kind of, it might be a genetic thing or whatever, but he was all, when I started doing this stuff and hanging out with the St. Louis comic crew, he was always harping the fact of like, you have to have a business card. You have to have your name on it.
Dude.
You have to have, and I'd be like, yeah, I know. But he was right about all of that.
Wow.
That's what I mean? He knew, awesome. Like when I set up at my first St. Louis Comic-Con, they weren't even conventions, they were just like swap meet style shows.
Sure.
He was like, you have to have your name like on the table, like before there was banners and stuff like that. And that stuff is all true, and it's all, part of the presentation. And Eric, like last episode, you guys were talking about self-publishing, and one thing that has helped me a lot, or that works very well, is having my Girl Scouts create their own trades, even though it's published by Image. It's my book that I do everything on. Having those at the table at conventions and having people be able to flip through them. I sell out of the trades at every convention because people that don't even know my work will stop by just based off seeing like the Tank Girl print I have on display, or the Akira. Right. I use the two license things, Tank Girl and Akira, to catch people's eyes. And then they come in and I'm like, hey, if you dig Tank Girl, which I did work on, I have this book called Girl Scouts, which is very Tank Girl-esque. They pick up the trade, they start flipping through it. It's only $20, and they're like, I'll give it a try. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
And that's smart.
I'm selling the trades to people that would normally not see my work. Even if I'm promoting it online on Instagram or whatever, having people be able to just flip through it in person.
Absolutely.
And it's all age ranges. It's guys, it's girls, it's whatever. And people just physically being able to flip through it and seeing colorful, crazy art. Most people are like, this is something different. $20. I'll give it a shot. That's been instrumental.
How many pages is that Tank Girl trade paperback, Jim?
The one,
or excuse me, the Girl Scouts trade paperback.
Oh shit! Both of them are at least 200 pages.
Yeah. So here's something that people don't seem to understand in as far as like all that experience, that tactile experience of being able to come up and take a look through your book, right? That is, I think it's profound, because people are like happy to take a look at prints, happy to take a look at the characters that they're used to. And there's plenty of people in conventions that do that. They don't even care about you as an artist. They go like, hey, do you have a Robin print? Like I've heard that before. Like, do you have something with Nightwing? I'm like, nope, sorry. But there's also something to be said about the strategy that you were using, which is like, hey, these characters, but also, and that's when your salesman part kicks in, right? Where you're like, hey, how do I move your attention off of that one poster that conceptually I worked on, but conceptually doesn't belong to me, right? Because that's Akira, that's Tank Girl. And then you move them onto the product in front of you. The other thing is that $20 is so like disposable these days at a convention, right? So here's the value proposition that you take a look at. You're like, here's how much I'm charging for a poster, right? Something like $15, whatever it is that people charge for posters these days. But then you move them onto a product like a trade paperback that's $20, and it's so much more substantial because it's like, you know what I mean? It has a heft to it at 200 pages. I'm going to sell it to you for $20, right? Potentially even draw a sketch on it, get my signature on it for you, whatever it is. You do, right?
I sign it, I do a little doodle, and I make sure I do it in front of them. Like I say, if you buy it, I'll sign it and do a quick little doodle. And I have my go-to signature,
of course,
that I can just do blindfolded. But that person is seeing that for the first time, and they're like, "Oh shit, awesome!"
Yeah,
and then I hand them the book, and they're like, "Cool, okay." Right. So we've had this exchange. We've had this kind of meaningful thing, and I've hopefully impressed them in a way. They're not like, "No, this is crappy, whatever." But,
I don't think
we've had this exchange, and then I have like these postcards with my art and my info on them with some cool art, and I slip the postcard inside the book, give it to them. So it's something like you want the exchange to be kind of something they'll remember in a way.
That's cool.
super helpful because Matteo and Shawn potentially is already on their way there. Matteo's like headstrong and like, you know, going at 500 miles per hour, moving into the space that you're talking about. So, but not only that, but it scales to the other people who are going to be going into this space too, which is like, what's the, like, you know, seeing essential sequentials line up, right? When you see like rows and rows of like purple banners, you know, and from one end you get like, you know, Klaus Jansen sitting over there, you know, God rest his soul, Tim Sale was sitting over there, and you get to see Matteo over here. They're like, these are like really well celebrated guys. But then from, at least from the perspective I'm taking right now, and potentially Matteo and obviously Shawn, like, you take a moment to go like, how do you, this isn't the right word, so forgive me, like, how do you humble yourself and not be in that automatic space?
Right.
Oh, I belong to the Purple Banner crew, and things come almost, you know, like automatically for me. I worked on King of Spies. I'm not going to say the other book. I worked on King of Spies.
Mr. Freeze.
You know? Like, you don't want to ever build that into your attitude, right? And again, that's something I appreciate from you, Jim. It's like, I worked on Tank Girl, I worked on Clerks, but it never permeates your head to like rely on that. There's always that added level of like, let's assume for a minute you don't know anything that I do, right? And how do you incorporate that into your business? How do you incorporate that into your presentation and how you sort of like show up to these shows, right? And I think when you're newish, you know, when you're like into the self-publishing game, you aspire to be part of that Purple Banner concept, but never, my attitude is, and I got humbled about this last year, you know, part of your attitude should always be like, imagine if you don't have this. Like, imagine if you don't have this automatic stuff built in, could you still be self-sustainable in those spaces, right? And I know very few of these, like, you know, guys who have worked. I can rattle off like 5 or 6 people, but I won't because it's unprofessional. Like, I can think of a handful of artists right now that if you were to leave them on their own, removing Batman, Superman, X-Men off of their like banner or their like resume, would they thrive in that environment? It almost needs them to be associated to that IP's level of success,
right?
So they in turn can like ride, like, you know, those, what are those fish that are attached to the ass of a shark? Where you're like,
auras.
Yeah, you're like, if the shark wasn't there, you wouldn't know what the fuck to do with yourself.
Right.
You know, what I love, especially now, as I'm moving into that space, and again, everybody on this panel, you having the most experience, Jim, like, oh, that's nice that you did those things, but it's not, you know, based on those things exclusively. It's because I can exist outside of that space.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I want to help instill, that in a lot more creators day to day when they're in the show.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I agree with you, Eric.
I understand the hustle though of new artists wanting to establish themselves off Marvel and DC properties. Of course.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I understand someone being like, I want to draw Batman. That's my dream.
Yep.
I'll do that, and then I'll go on and do my creator own thing. Like, that's a formula in comics, which like I totally understand that. Because I love Batman. Like, Batman's cool. Spider-Man's awesome. But for me, like I said, I think I got very lucky realizing very early on, like, I'm not going to be able to do a monthly book for Marvel and DC. So how do I navigate in this industry? Like, how do I be me and actually like make a living off of that?
For sure.
That's a realization I wish I had many years ago too.
Yeah.
Right. But it's never, to me, it's never too late.
No. I mean, I've adapted it now, but yeah.
Well, I mean, for Shawn, it is because he's
for sure, Shawn, for sure. 100.
Wait, you didn't let Matteo finish. Why, Matteo? Why now? Why is it important?
Well, because you're old as fuck.
Ah, there it is. That's what I was waiting here. Right.
For those people who don't know, Shawn is like 50-year-old. Yeah, like 50 years old, but like right at the cusp of 80. Right at like he's right at
going on grave.
He's collecting pension checks at this point that most people shouldn't be able to touch at the moment. Anyway.
So, Jim, what's the plan with Girl Scouts? Like, are you writing new stuff? Are you actually drawing a new chapter? What do you?
Yeah.
Did you have an overall plan, like of X number of issues?
Yeah, I mean, I have the Girl Scout Stone Ghost. See, this is not good hustle. I should have had it like right here where I could pull it out.
But let me hold on, Jim. Let me tell you, like I love the fact that you're about to go pitch this new thing that you're doing, but I also want to like give a lot of love to Matteo, who went into interviewer mode right now. Who went is like, so Jim, what are you doing with the Girl Scouts and blah blah blah? When typically it's like, let's talk about me and the next thing that I'm working on. That was really amazing. You gotta give this.
He knows what's up.
You gotta give this kid a lot of love to be like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do when somebody's on my show. You know what I mean? Go ahead, Jim. Sorry, Girl Scouts. What's next?
So there was a trade that came out last year called Girl Scouts Stone Ghost, and then I'm doing new Girl Scouts material for the last 6 months on zestworld.com.
That's right.
As these
That's awesome
online comics that it's basically like a Patreon. Like you subscribe, it's like $7 a month. You get a new comic, and then the weeks that you don't get the new comic, you get all my behind the scenes material. So like my layouts, pencils, inks. So it really is like I'm treating it like a Patreon where I'm posting new stuff every Friday. And then I keep the publishing rights on that. So when my contract is done with them in like 4 months, I'm going to publish all that material sometime probably next year.
Jim, let me ask you, since it's so much like a Patreon, if Zestworld doesn't renew or you choose not to go with them again, whatever, would you consider having a Patreon for what you're doing next?
Possibly. Although this whole Patreon thing, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's basically a full, like doing the comics at Zestworld, it's basically like a full-time job.
Right, but they're paying you like a full-time job to do it.
They paid me a year salary to do a year's
nice salary, right?
Which was fair. It was good, and it regardless of the subscriber numbers and that, they gave me a set fee, which I get because we've the whole online comics thing with Substack, Zestworld. I think the numbers across the board could be better. The amount of eyes on this stuff could be better, but it's just, you guys, we're in like this sea of content, as you know, and so getting people to go to all these different places, Substack, Zestworld, this, that, my blog, my whatever. It's just a lot. It is a lot. And also, most of my fans, when they come up to me at the cons and I give them the flyer for the Zestworld stuff, their first question is it going to be printed? And I say yes, of course. They're like, I'll wait for the print version.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. So my fans still want my material in print form. They still want.
Right. I meant using Patreon as a means to bring in some income while you're creating it and then print it.
Oh, right. Yeah, it would be something I would have to figure out the plan for it. But
Shawn and I spoke about this, man, and obviously as a component or like as a lever that you can pull, Patreon is great because all their infrastructure is already built and you can do blah, blah, blah with it, right? There's clear track record of people being able to use it. But I'm a huge proponent of bringing everything into your own internal ecosystem.
Yeah.
To not worry about like this thing that potentially is not under your control. It's a, what do you call it? It's a lever, but you know, heaven forbid. Like to your point though, Jim, you're like, it's so all over the place. Why would you want to spread everybody to all over the place rather than just going like immediately to your front door? You know, like you're not saying nowhere in like using the convention circuit as an example. Nowhere do you go as you're sitting at your table. Hey, Jim, can I buy a copy of X from you? And you're like, actually, I'm not selling that at this table. So and so over there is selling it. That doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
And
like
to your
find
point,
a way
Eric,
to bring that internally, you know?
To your point, Jim, I was going to ask you about this today. Like I about a year ago was invited by Instagram to start monetizing my posts, my reels. And I did, and I was making a little bit of money every month. And then I turned Jim onto it and he did it and he's making money every month. But did you notice they have paused that program now?
Yeah.
So it's like all of a sudden that money's just gone for no explanation. They didn't even like tell you they're suspending it. I was like, I noticed I couldn't turn it on and I looked online. I was like, oh shit, they stopped doing it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that actually, man. Because their system, they want people to just post reels now, but you can't monetize that. I don't know. I haven't been as active on Instagram or social media the last couple of months because I just feel kind of burnt out.
Yeah, that's
I was gonna say.
I've been the same way. I mean,
Same shit every day. Like I'll do my daily scroll and it's like, cool, another drawing from this guy, another photo of this girl's ass. Like that's cool. Another thing that
you're saying that gets old, Jim?
It doesn't. But it is the same shit every day though, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
for sure.
and you guys know this. So it's kind of like,
but and that's where I really like what Eric's saying. Like ultimately it'd be great for all of us to have our own websites that would act as our social media, that would act as our Patreon, that acts as our storefront, everything our own.
Keep in mind, just based on what everything you guys are saying is going to come back to that anyway, right? People are experiencing, a deluge, and because of that, there's fatigue, right? You're like, I want to go to a place where I know that is exclusively that. Like I am hardcore enough where it's not a passive experience for me. You know what I mean? Like Instagram is incredibly passive, right? Whatever pops up is what pops up, and that's why it gets frustrating for people to be like, oh, the what do you call it? What is it? I want to say analog, but it's not.
Algorithm.
The algorithm is like forcing me to go one way, right? It's not forcing you to do anything. It's just pumping into your eyeballs in a passive way. You're sitting there ingesting it, right? Or digesting it. That's up to you. But I think there's something to be said about that active viewer, active customer, active sort of like fan of your work, to go and look for it, because they know, hey, if I go to Jim's site, if I go to Maddie's site, if I go to Shawn's site, that's where I'm going to get. Like, those are the people that you want. Those are the people that are like going to actively search out for you. Matteo, you were going to ask something, but Shawn...
Oh no, I was just gonna follow up on the first question that he asked. So basically, what you do, like the sequence of things that you do is, first you release the episodes on this platform for the first 4 months, right? So you release an episode every how long?
Every 3 weeks is a brand new comic.
Okay, so it's that 20 pages, more or less.
No, it's more like I break it down to, because it's formatted for your phone, so it's a vertical.
Okay.
Like webtoons, and it's it averages like 14 to 20 panels.
Okay.
Which I'm doing everything: writing, penciling, inking, lettering, and coloring. So that takes me about week and a half, 2 weeks to do one of those, and then that debuts, and then the week after that is like the behind the scenes, the script, the breakdowns, the layouts, and pencils. The week after that is just the inks.
Yeah.
And then the week after that is the next comic, basically.
Gotcha. And then the next step, once you decide, do you do the floppies then, or you skip directly to TPB?
I'll have enough material for a book that'll be over probably 80 pages.
That's awesome.
So it'll instantly be thicker than like a floppy comic.
Yeah.
Which I'm also thinking of, man, when that comes time to do that, I'm just going to load that with like 20 or 30 pages of additional stuff and just have another full-blown trade.
Okay. And the trade, do you self-publish it, or you go straight with Image?
That's a good question. I haven't figured that out yet.
Okay.
I'm kind of tempted to just self-publish it, because I kind of want to just do whatever I want with it. Like maybe do some crazy printing with it, or like a foil cover or something that I wouldn't normally be able to get away with, and just almost not even worry about making my money back, but just doing like a fun thing. Like this one's for like the hardcore fans of mine. This is for me and my fans. Like, let's go with some spot varnish and weird. I don't know. You know what I mean, man? Just like make it my own. And,
dude.
But this project that we're talking about, it's still Girl Scouts, right?
Yeah.
It's still Girl Scouts stories. Okay. Yeah.
And it's
so you don't mind by, be having this, free format for which you published one thing with Image, and then, the next thing you don't know how you're going to publish it. You just decide as things go.
Yeah. And it's cool because like Zestworld literally let me write and draw whatever I wanted. There's no editorial interference. I don't show them the material in advance. I just make the material and post it.
Yeah.
And if I can plug real quick too, anybody watching, if you want, you can read the entire back catalog of these strips for free at zestworld.com. So you're basically paying for the exclusive when the new strips come up, but then those strips after I think 3 weeks become free to the public to read. So people can just go to my back catalog right now and check out the material.
That's awesome.
I was gonna say we're at an hour, so that was a good segue into like plugging your stuff. When is it Zestworld? Where else, Jim?
Zestworld.com and jimmahfood.com to order books, prints, enamel pins, mini comics, sketchbooks. And then I'm just at Jim MAHFOOD on all my social media, Instagram, Twitter.
What's the very next show that you're gonna be at? Where are you going?
Como with you guys, Italy.
Yeah, boy. I hope that was going to be the answer. That's freaking amazing.
Be a whole other experience, man. Thank you, Matteo, by the way, again.
Oh, my pleasure, brother.
Yeah, thank
you, Matteo, for opening up the country to Jim. You had him on a watch list.
Yeah, I spoke to a couple of people, and
I was going to show up in Italy regardless. I was just going to come along for the trip and annoy everyone, and luckily, I think you helped break down some walls with the Como people, and
it's going to be a lot of fun, dude. It's going to.
I'm excited.
And speaking of shows, we're making plans for next year, so it's gonna be in a while. But we're making plans on doing a specific show next year that we've never done before, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's gonna be good. I think it's gonna be in Jim's old stomping grounds, right?
Everyone, the 5 people that follows us.
Jim's gonna live there. He'll be living there by then.
Yeah. Please don't blow up where Jim freaking lives. All right, Shawn, what are you working on? What are you up to? Give the people who are watching.
I am neck deep in these Marvel snap cards I've been doing, and I'm also getting art ready for Como. Working on this podcast. I'm gonna do some filler episodes of me inking and experimenting and talking about what I'm doing as I'm doing it, just so we have some buffer. And I am putting my mind heavily into figuring out how I'm going to get my book off the ground.
Yeah, sweet,
awesome.
What's next, Matteo? What are you doing?
So for me, I recently released my new sketchbook, 5 Shades of Grey. That's available.
It's so stupid. I love it. It's
because that's actually what I use.
Right, it's just 5 values.
5 Shades of Grey.
Listen to me. So, it still doesn't make any less stupid. But yeah, awesome.
Don't listen.
It's available on the Essential Sequential website.
What's the price tag on that, Maddie? How much does it cost?
It's $30 plus shipping and handling. And to the people who were trying, because somebody contacted me online, to the people who are trying to buy it and have it shipped to Europe, like the shipping cost is like
crazy,
really too much. So we're trying to find somebody who can help us, like a distributor that can help us distribute directly in Europe. And I'll keep everybody posted on social media when we'll succeed in that. And other than that, I'm just finishing a couple of covers, and then I'll start writing my book.
Nice.
I will.
Social media is at what? MatteoScalera.com.
Matteo Scalera. And I'm about to start, organizing my website.
There you go.
I don't have yet.
Me too. That's on my plate too.
It's gonna be MatteoScalera.com, I guess. But
assuming that nobody has that go and register that name really quick, please. Right after we get this call, please go register that.
Yeah, register the name fast, dude. Don't let anyone grab that.
Well, I mean, if it didn't happen like till now, I don't think it's gonna happen like tomorrow.
You just freaking jinxed it. Yeah. I'm gonna go do it.
So, one of the 5 people that follow us.
You're challenging me to.
Eric, just buy the domain name and then have it redirect to your site every time.
I'm doing it, man. Every time. I'm just gonna sell Matteo's books.
So other than that, I'm Matteo Scalera on Instagram and Scalera Matteo on Twitter.
He got confused on Twitter. He was like, I don't know how this works. So
no, Matteo Scalera was taken, and I think it was
see what I mean?
Years earlier.
Wait, he took
I
his own
couldn't,
name for himself.
remember
Mateo, you might have registered your own domain name already.
Yeah, why don't you go check? I think you might have done it ahead of time.
So on 2 different names on Twitter and Instagram, but whatever.
All right, kids. Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for your time. Shawn,
Thanks for having me, you guys. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome hanging out with you. The only thing that's missing right now with us chit-chatting like this is when you guys have alcohol, and I'm looking at to see which one of you gets drunker first.
Oh, Italy will be doing that. We'll be doing that.
Oh, yeah, of course. We're going to record an episode from here, from my studio. So that's awesome. Going to be fun. And also, next episode, I think we're going to be having another guest.
It's not next week. It's the week after. I was hoping we could do the 3 weeks next week.
We're going to be having another guest. We're starting to have guests.
Yeah, my goal right now is 1 or 2 a month. I was going to talk to you guys about that.
Yeah, don't get too excited, the 5 of you who tune in to this silly podcast, because Matteo wants to jump the gun. If you're interested in buying any of my stuff, please go to iconiccomics.com. You can buy copies of Arc Athena 1 through 3. They're available there now. I'm working currently on finishing up book 4, and we're going to release those at a pretty consistent cadence, about 3 months apart from each other. If you're interested in following me on my social media, it's all under Eric Canete, at Eric Canete on Twitter, at Eric Canete on Instagram. Although similar to this conversation, I'm falling less and less in love with Instagram because their algorithm freaking sucks.
Yeah.
And very, very soon, we're going to make ericcanete.com, which is very active, registered under my own domain. By the way, I have the name Matteo, so I don't have to worry about the panic of suddenly not belonging to me. You can go there now, check out some of my artwork. All right, we'll see each other in Como.
Eric, hold on. I've got issue 3 now.
Yeah,
beautiful
in hand. And I do put
3.
the links in the description of every episode, so everyone can just go in there, click, and get what they want.
I put my sketchbook in there.
I do. I always do. I did last week too.
There you go. An hour and 11 minutes, and we managed to keep the conversation with only 1 dead airspace. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to hit this bumper now and then call it a day. Thanks, everybody.
This is the INKPULP Podcast. This is the INKPULP Podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.
Hey, there it is. We hit recording.